Hello everyone, welcome back to Educator Call Snap channel. How you doing? So today I wanted to post a meta tier list. I was looking through the feedback of what people were looking for, and that came up a lot. But then I realized, okay, it's gonna take longer than a day to make a meta tier list that I would be satisfied with, right? So either do nothing or I'll do something else. So I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about building a deck from limited pool 3 cards. So one of my viewers yesterday asked me, "Oh, I don't know what to build. I have this list of cards, but I have no idea what to do." So I asked him for his list. He gave me a list of what he had, and then we kind of went through what I thought you could build from the list he had. So I kind of wanted to showcase that experience with this player in particular. Obviously, not everyone's going to have all the cards there or something. I might do a follow-up video where I kind of go through like a general guide for building with limited pool threes, but I wanted to address this person in particular and just my experience with their. So let's begin. So first of all, here's everything he had. All the pool 3, 4, 5s he has. You can see the pool 5s at the top. Valkyrie Scrawl, and then he bought Hidden Monkey Nimrod. So those are his non-pool 3 cards, and then he has a decent amount of pool 3s to choose from. So obviously, first thing for this person, right, is we want to take a look at what cards stand out. What can you build around? There's a number of cards, pool 3 cards specifically, in the game where if you get one of these, well, you can usually find other pieces, or the other pieces are series 2 or below, that you can really synergize and make decks off of. So there was like 5 that jumped out to me when I looked through his list. I wonder if you guys are, you could pause and like try to figure out which ones jump out to you, like what would you build around, that kind of thing. But in particular 5, I'm sure like you might have more or something, but those are the ones that jumped out to me, and we'll kind of talk about them, right? So the ones that I was like looking at, what can I make a deck, looking through this particular list, right? Those cards included Lockjaw, Sarah, Mystique, Patriot, Dracula. Those are the 5. I will say Doctor Doom, She-Hulk, Wave, Hela. Those 4 also jumped out to me, but they weren't like as clear. Like I felt like I needed pieces. Like She-Hulk, I thought I needed magic. This was like yesterday. This was like on the fly. So maybe you could argue there's more. Cause now that I'm looking at it like later on, no pressure, there's more decks that jump in my head. But at the time, Lockjaw I think is a very popular card. Lockjaw, Electro, those 2 always jump out to me. Those are like the 2 I'm always looking at if someone's asking me for what to build. I always look for those cards first. Sarah is 3rd, and like, okay, do you have a Sarah? Okay, that can make you a build. And then Mystique is like right after, because Mystique could really synergize with everything. And since we had the Mystique, the Patriot makes a lot of sense to me. So since you have Mystique Patriot, bam, that's another combo. And Dracula, I just think is a really good card, especially early on when you're building. There's just a lot of things you can do with a Dracula. So even if you want to go like Zoo with some heavy stuff for the Dracula or whatever, there's a lot of ways I feel you can use Draculas. And Doctor Doom, She-Hulk, Wave, I think those are just very strong cards you can put into a lot of things. So those also I think would make a lot of sense. And then Hela, I just think if you are new or relatively new, Hela can make a deck that people can't deal with just because the high roll potential of a Hela deck is really high. And sometimes when you're losing to things that don't feel fair, you got to play something that's not fair in itself. And if a Hela deck pops off, it's just not fair. So that's another card I always look at to suggest people if they just want to win, I give them a Hela deck. So I kind of want to showcase some of the decks I came up with for this player in particular with the cards that he had. What did I make up? So first things first, right? One thing I noticed is that he did buy Hitmonkey, right? And he had all the pieces, almost all the pieces for my Hidden Monkey deck that I have on YouTube very recently, I was like, you basically have all the pieces. You have the Hood, you have the Hidden Monkey, you have the Beast, you have Mysterio, you have She-Hulk. Like this thing works perfectly for you, right? So the one thing he was missing was the Wasp, but I was like, okay, Wasp is not like I wouldn't say, oh, don't run the deck. You don't have the Wasp. Oh my god, like no, I wouldn't say that. So I was like, okay, the easiest thing is like to put the Yellow Jacket in because he does have a Yellow Jacket. So I was like, okay, run Yellow Jacket instead of the Wasp. Obviously, you might lose some power, right? Like instead of having a huge power swing, you might have like -1, -2 overall power. But I feel like that's not enough to deny playing this deck list. So that was like the first one that jumped out to me, right? I think it makes a lot of sense. Obviously, you don't have the Wasp, but like that's whatever. Next thing was, of course, Patriot, I believe, was the next one that jumped out to me because he has the Ultron, he has the Doctor Doom, he has Patriot Mystique. Those are the ones that really jump out to me. He was like, he said he didn't have the debris, right? And I'm like, debris doesn't really matter. It's not important enough to not play the deck. The Wasp, same thing, right? It's not important enough to not play the deck if you don't know what deck to build. So you could switch the Wasp with a Squirrel Girl. You can switch the debris with a Cyclops or the Thing, or really, there's a lot you could put debris instead. Cosmo would work, etc., etc. But that was another thing I would look at. And just the point here is that even if you don't have all the cards for like a premium deck, you have to understand that the cards that matter and the cards that don't, right? Patriot, Mystique, those cards matter. Ultron mostly matters. You could play without Ultron, but the deck would need a lot more early game because you're not relying on Ultron to be your finisher. You're relying on just consistent pressure, and then Doom might be your finisher, Onslaught might be your finisher. So it's a little bit different of a build path. But for this particular build, he had all the pieces and makes a lot of sense. Next thing we went towards was a Sarah deck, right? Since he had Sarah, I was like, okay, you could make a Sarah deck. And since he had Hidden Monkey as well, he could do the Hit Monkey version of the Sarah deck. We built it out. Sarah isn't like super uh restrictive in the cards you need. You really just need Sarah, and a lot of the other cards are pool series 2 or lower. So it was pretty easy to make this one. You could also just play a normal Sarah deck if you don't want to add Hidden Monkey and Mysterio in there. You could definitely do that. So that was an easy one to recommend there. And then next up, we had this Lockjaw deck. So this one I made on the fly for him particularly, since he has Lockjaw, but he didn't have like some of the other pieces. I was thinking Lockjaw and Dracula. Those were like the two starting pieces that I wanted to include, and then I built around those starting pieces. So this one I also tested on afterwards. Like I played a couple games with this exact list just to feel how good it was. Felt pretty good to me, and I had some people that I wasn't even helping on the stream be like, hey, I took this deck because it looked cool and I'm doing well, which I thought was funny. But even though this isn't like a standard list you'd find anywhere, it just uses the core principles. The Quicksilver is a unique thing I use in Lockjaw sometimes if you don't have a lot of cards. I think Quicksilver with Lockjaw kind of works. You don't play the Quicksilver early. You will wait until you get the Lockjaw, then you'll play the Quicksilver into the Lockjaw. Just to have a guaranteed early target, since you don't have a lot of early units to play, right? Normally, if you don't want to run Quicksilver, you use Wasp or something like that. But since we didn't have a Wasp, right, we'll just use the Quicksilver alternatively. And then since he didn't have Magneto, which is what I normally put in here, I just put Hulk. Same stat line, you just don't have the move effect. Like, it's not that big of a deal. So this was something I just made for that player specifically, just using the tools that they had. I think it worked out relatively well. And then the last thing, this one I did not think about while I was helping him. This was just now as I'm doing this, like putting everything down. I was like, oh, I could have suggested a Doom Wave deck, or a Doom Wave deck. He had Wave, he had Doctor Doom. Though on the fly, I didn't really think about this particular list, but when I was thinking about it afterwards, I was like, oh, he actually could have made this. He has the Zero, he has the Maximus, he has the Red Skull, right? Normally you put Arrow in here, But I think Red Skull is a very easy alternative, especially with the zero you're playing. And then the goal of this one is you play Wave, and then you can play She-Hulk or plus something else, right? So you get to play 2 big cards and usually lock them out. And then your early game is just very aggressive tempo or very control cards with the Iceman Scorpion. So I thought that could be another card, another deck he could have played if I was thinking about it. But it just goes to show you there's actually a lot of decks you can play as you get more cards, as you get more tools. There's definitely a lot you can use. It just kind of depends on how much you know and what cards you think are important to play with. Probably could have I probably could have also suggested something with Valkyrie, but I definitely think like 4 or 5 decks for a person that wants to play something is enough to really get started. And then as he gets more comfortable and feels okay, then he'll just like it's free. It'll give him more time to experiment. So that's really the situation I want to talk about today. And I might go even deeper and have a more general guide, like discussing every single 3 that is a build piece and how you can build into that. But that's for another day. I'm currently working on a meta guide or a meta tier list for the early April season. And I'm definitely excited for the patch. It's going to be on the 18th. Hopefully they'll address matchmaking there. That's like my hope, I guess. And we'll see how that happens. But overall, hope you enjoyed this one. Take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And I'll see you in the next one.
Educated calling snap. Once you watch him, you won't go back. He'll teach you tomorrow, snap. Your skills will be improving. How you do